Welcome in, everybody. How we doing? How we doing? All right. Let's get this thing started, shall we?
Welcome to the Love for the Game podcast. Here's your host, Reed Napper.
All right, welcome in, everybody, to another live edition of the Love for the Game podcast. I'm your host, Reed Napper. Thank you for joining us this evening. We are going to be diving into the recap of the Week 1 slate, my predictions that, didn't really fare too well. A lot to discuss. Texas, Ohio State lived up to the billing, two heavyweight titans battling each other. That one turned out to be a barn burner of sorts, a defensive battle that some weren't really expecting to begin with. So, and then the story of the day, honestly, Florida State upsetting Alabama. We're gonna get into every headline. LSU heading into the real Death Valley in Clemson to claim what's rightfully theirs as a Death Valley title, and LSU gets a huge win there in Clemson. Notre Dame, not for say laying an egg on the road at Miami, but definitely had some chances. But Mario Cristobal, what a job to get the job done for the Canes in their home opener against Notre Dame. Plenty of talking points. We will hit them. We will hit them all. Make sure to leave your comments in the chat. I will try to do my best to keep up with them as best as I can. But here we go. We're going to dive right into it. Without further ado, we're going to start with the first headliner game of Saturday, Ohio State and Texas. Ohio State winning this one 14-7. The storylines of this game, mainly Ohio State's defense looked insane. Now the stats won't really, show it too well, but Ohio State's defense played really well, even though the glaring stat that pulls the narrative one way to another is right here. Total yardage, Texas outgaining Ohio State 336 to 203 on the day is insane for the level that Ohio State's defense was playing at in that game. Another glaring stat, Texas 5 of 14 on third down, whereas Ohio State also struggling on third down, going 3 for 12 in the game. But another huge stat, Texas 1 for 5 on fourth down efficiency. Two of them coming in the red zone, and one of them to seal the game. Caleb Downs making a great play on the out route. I believe that was out to Endries, the tight end for Texas. Ohio State making a great play there. So a huge defensive battle here in this game, and Ohio State coming out with the huge win to start the season. Now, I have to address something right off the bat here. I was getting a ton of backlash on TikTok for a clip saying that me stating that I said that the wrong team was favored in this game. And honestly, I don't really necessarily think that's, too far off of a case. This was a pick'em game. At the end of the day, the spread closed at 1.5. Ohio State ended up pulling out the victory outright, covering the spread. But, they didn't really look too impressive on offense. I'm not going to lie. Julian Sain's stat line, even though he had that great touchdown to Carnell Tate, hell of a play by him. But still, that Ohio State offense looked sluggish. Now, that's no argument to Texas's offense, who also looks sluggish. Arch Manning is another big talking point from this game. He did not live up to the hype, at least as of now. Arch Manning did not live up to the billing for sure. There's no doubt about it. And you look at this box score and you say, oh, would you take 17 to 30 completions to attempts? Oh, for sure. 170, okay, could have been better. I think he only had like 26 passing yards going into halftime. So definitely did not come out of the gates hot for sure. And that interception he did throw was very uncharacteristic of someone of his caliber, of someone, his notability, you would not expect Arch Manning to really throw, that interception that he did in the manner that he did at the time that he did. And that just gives more credit to Matt Patricia and that Ohio State defense. I was not expecting Matt Patricia to really, show off the defense that he did in that game. It really did surprise me, the level of defense that they did play in that game. I was expecting, similar to last night with Bill Belichick and UNC, I was completely expecting Matt Patricia, to kind of struggle, out of the gates. As I said in my prediction earlier in the week last week, I was expecting him to struggle against, multiple style offense. Sarkisian bringing out different formations, motions, stuff like that, different personnel groups, to really, question Matt Patricia in that defense. And he had him ready. He had him ready for everything that Sarkisian threw at him with the Texas offense. Now, again, Arch Manning did not play to the level that I expected him to, nor did most of the country, expect Arch Manning, completely lay in it. Like 58 QBR against Ohio State. Now, that's nothing against that Ohio State defense. They played amazing, but you were expecting, at least on some level, Arch Manning to, produce a little better than that. At least from my perspective, I was predicting that. But for sure, hats off to Matt Patricia and that Ohio State defense. Ryan Day got his squad ready to go. He's said time and time again throughout numerous interviews leading up to the season that this is a brand new team. They have nothing to take from last season into this season. Yes, they're the defending national champions, but this is a whole new team, a whole new group that has to write their own story. And I fully believe that was the story for this Ohio State team coming into this game. They wanted to start it off with a bang, completely new team, and write their own story. And again, that Cardinal Tate touchdown was unbelievable. Fully jumps up and almost has the ball in his lap, but then has to let go of the ball for a split second, hits off of his leg, and then recatches it as he goes to the ground. It was an unbelievable play by Cardinal Tate. But again, the stories of this game, that Ohio State defense was incredible, even though the box score is going to tell you different based on these yardages. Hats off to the Ohio State defense. Completely was not expecting that performance from them. I did end up picking Texas in the game. I picked them to win outright, and they completely exceeded my expectations. Shout out to Brian Hartline as well. I was getting flack on TikTok about that too, about how I thought Brian Hartline, we haven't seen him as a coordinator. Sometimes coordinators don't necessarily translate well to or position coaches, excuse me. You don't necessarily see position coaches translate well to coordinator positions all the time. So, I had my doubts about him early on, and he proved me wrong in this game. Now, Julian Sayin didn't look the best on his end either. If we go back to this box score here, Julian Sayin didn't play that well either. 13 of 20, 126 and a touchdown. Now 74.5 QBR. Definitely played better than Arch, but there were a few times that this receiving group, dropped some easy balls. There were a few on the first few drives. I remember the fourth down on their first drive for Ohio State. Max Clare, right on the sideline, hit him right in the hands, and he dropped it. Another dump off to Jeremiah Smith that he dropped early on in that game. So I'm sure they will definitely clean it up. And I expect, these big three of Brandon Ennis, Jeremiah Smith, and Cardinal Tate, to really take a step forward coming into this next game. I think they play Ohio next. Don't quote me on that. I will check in a second. But this defense, man, where is he? Caleb Downs, unbelievable. 5 total tackles, only 3 solo tackles, but his presence in the game and the way that Matt Patricia was maneuvering him around was insane. He almost had him in a 3-point stance down on the line of scrimmage a couple times, which was incredible to see from a safety, the key player in that Ohio State defense. So, they answered a bunch of questions. They overcame my doubts in them, Ohio State, and that will reflect in my week 2 poll coming out here in this episode. So, again, hats off to Ryan Day, Matt Patricia, Brian Hartline, that entire staff. This is a huge win to kick off their season, and I fully expect the Buckeyes and Texas to both be on upward trajectories to go through the rest of the season. Unbelievable performance by Ohio State, though. They get the dub in week 1, 14-7. And that just proves that I shouldn't doubt Ohio State in big spots like this again, because they've proved it time and time again to come up big in these kind of spots. So hats off to Ohio State for sure. Let me pull up the rest of the slate here. We're going to try to go in chronological order here. So we will go to Alabama and Florida State next. Florida State upsetting the Crimson Tide in Tallahassee, 31-17. Another team I got a lot of pushback on Twitter from a couple of Florida State fans, and rightly so. I believed that they were fully gonna get subpar play from the quarterback position with Tommy Castellanos, and words got put back right in my mouth. I said back in April that Tommy Castellanos could just lead them to 6 wins. That might not be the case now. This team is legit. This team is legit. Now, a big part of this game is Alabama's lack of effort. They had a bunch of loafs and just didn't really look like they wanted to be out there. Now I understand it was raining the whole game, but you would think Kalen DeBoer would have gotten this team ready and motivated to play in a game of this magnitude. And they probably thought going into this game that Florida State would just push over based on the season that they had last year, and that certainly was not the case in this game. Florida State came out and rolled them early. Now Alabama started this game off right on their first drive and hit a touchdown in their first drive, and from there on, it was Florida State. It was Florida State right here. Save us 2-yard pass from Ty Simpson. And from there on, Florida State 7-7, 14-7, 17-7, 24-7. And Alabama made a little bit of a comeback here, made it 24-10 and then 24-17 early there in the fourth quarter at the 11-minute mark. But hats off to Florida State, keeping the foot on the gas, ended up winning 31-17, got that last touchdown in the fourth quarter. Thomas Castellanos lived up to all the talk he was given in the offseason, saying Saban's not there to save him anymore. And he was completely right. He only had to throw the ball 14 times for 9 completions, 152, because they were just killing them on the ground. Like Castellanos, 16 carries for 70 yards and a touchdown. Danzy, 56 yards. Chroma, 31 yards. Like they had 5 backs of over 20 plus, or I guess 4 backs plus Castellanos. They had 4 backs of 20 plus rushing yards on 6 carries, and Danzy only had 3. They were just killing them on the ground. It was kind of similar to the Baylor Auburn game. Alabama just had no answer to the mobility of the quarterback, and that's been Alabama's MO. You go back to the Vanderbilt game last year against Pavia. Pavia was running all over them in the RPO and read option game, and that's a huge factor. Jackson Arnold ran on Alabama a little bit last year. Now, granted, they got some defensive touchdowns there for Oklahoma in that game, but Jackson Arnold was still mobile in that game. So mobile quarterbacks are Alabama's kryptonite, especially under DeBoer, because they just can't seem to have any answer to a mobile quarterback at all. But let's move back to the Alabama side just real quick offensively. Ty Simpson, I didn't really think he played that bad. Ty Simpson was not the problem in this game. Now, a glaring 23 of 43, but that's because they had to play from behind the whole game. So of course, 43 pass attempts, that's going to be inflated. And this receiving group outside of Jeremy Bernard didn't really do much. Ryan Williams had a few catches, but didn't really do much. Save us, other than that touchdown, didn't really do much. So Jeremy Bernard is arguably now the number 1 receiver, because who knows how Ryan Williams is after going into, I think, concussion protocol. He took a lick in that game for sure. There late in the fourth quarter, he took a huge hit. So I think this 48.6, I don't really think that's an accurate number to describe Ty Simpson's day. I thought he was serviceable at best. I thought he was one of the players that, actually wanted to compete and win this game. And I think it's a big factor for him. He also didn't turn the ball over other than this fumble. But he didn't lose it. He was able to recover it. So I think it's a huge factor that at least your quarterback isn't giving up on you. I think that's a huge thing. But this Alabama defense, man, you would have thought, the names coming back on this team from last year really would have, had a fire under their belly, and they just didn't. They were just showing no to little lack of effort, all game. They had no answer for Castellanos in that Florida State offense. 6 total tackles for Lawson, Justin Jefferson 6 tackles, Keon Sabb, one of the larger named returning players returning, Deontay Lawson, Keon Sabb, LT Overton coming back, Damani Jackson coming back, Dijon Lee coming back. You get all these big like names returning from last season for this Alabama defense, and they didn't do squat. They didn't do anything in this game. They did not do anything defensively to hold Florida State. And again, props to Castellanos in this offense, man. They backed up that talk. They backed up Castellanos' talk, and all the props to him. I don't know if they deserve to be number 14 in the country based on the AP poll, but they definitely deserve to be ranked this week for sure in that middle tier. I don't know as high as 14, but props to Gus Malzahn and getting that offense ready for sure. And Tom White, the D coordinator that came over from Nebraska to Florida State, he had a game plan to lock up that Alabama offense, and whatever that game plan was, he did it. But the biggest narrative of this game is Alabama, no effort. Tackling was a huge factor in this game as well. They need to go back to square one when it comes to tackling. They definitely need to work on that, going forward. But again, the lack of effort for this Alabama team would not have been a talking point when Saban was still there. If Nick Saban was still the coach here, there would have been no discussions of lack of effort, hustle, running the ball, toughness, everything like that, especially defensively. You would not have talked about that at least once with Nick Saban as the head coach. So again, hats off to the Florida State fans, that coaching staff. Thomas Castellanos especially backed up all that talk. And he proved me wrong. I had people, as I said before, I had people calling me out on Twitter saying that 6 wins was my projection with Castellanos at quarterback, because I thought 6 wins would have been a decent improvement off of a 2-10 season. I even called for when Nico wanted to go into the portal and he ended up at UCLA. I called out that FSU should have been in the running for him, because I truly didn't believe in Thomas Castellanos, and he proved me wrong this game. So I'm going to put my hand up. If any of the Florida State fans are that were on Twitter, giving me crap about it, hand up. I deserve it. I deserve it. Maybe you win like 8 games now, or you're a fringe ACC, championship contender. Maybe you are. Maybe you are. That's what happens when you make projection that bold in the off season of college football. There never is an off season, but that's what I get. That's what I get. So hats off to this Florida State team. Unbelievable performance. They get the biggest result of the weekend, in my opinion. They upset then 8 Alabama 31-17. So hats off to Florida State again. Hand up. That was my bad. I called Alabama covering that 2 touchdown spread. I think I even said they win by 17 plus, and that got flipped on its head. So shout out to Florida State, shout out to Castellanos, hell of a job done. And they get a huge win over Alabama to start the season. Like, just look at this crowd right here. The whole renovated Doak Campbell is on the field. Storm that field. I don't care if there's any fines. Storming the field is a ritual when you get a win of this magnitude. Especially after your starting quarterback was talking that much. So again, I'm going to put my hand up. Completely misjudged that game, misread it entirely. So shout out to Florida State. Hell of a job done. Great win. Yeah, can't complain about that. So let me go. We are going to go to the next game in chronological order here. We got LSU, Clemson. LSU winning this game 17-10 over the Clemson Tigers in the Battle of Death Valleys. LSU proving that they have the real Death Valley. And storylines of this game. Cade Klubnik didn't really do much in this game to really put Clemson in the driver's seat. 19-38, 230, a -1 QBR. I haven't looked at these stats yet. I'm just talking off of remembering what I watched. A -1 QBR for Cade Klubnik in this game. I did not know that. And an interception. So obviously turning over the ball. Biggest storyline Clemson offensively, they could not run the ball worth anything. And these stats represent that entirely. 20 carries, 31 yards, 1.6 average for carries. Now I understand Adam Randall here, number 8 for Clemson, is a converted receiver at running back. And Dabo said time and time again that the best thing that Adam Randall does with the ball in his hands is just run. But it's completely different when you're a receiver getting the ball, because all you're trying to do is run straight up the field. Whereas a running back, you're gauging the line. You're trying to hit the hole the best you can, try to avoid the linebackers scraping down, all these different things, all these different components to being a running back. You have to account is vision is his vision good enough to be a running back, especially for Clemson? And I don't think he is. I don't know if Adam Randall is really the answer. We're going to see in these next few games for Clemson, especially this week. I know they have a cupcake this week, but then they go to Georgia Tech next week. So, and that's no pushover game for my projected ACC runner-ups. So this receiver group, made some plays here and there. Bryant Wesco and TJ Moore, obviously, again, their share of receptions and yardage there. But aside from that, I see zeros in this touchdown column. So Clemson receivers didn't really do much at all. Also, the Clemson defense, I was actually kind of fine with. I thought they performed pretty well. They couldn't really stop the run either. LSU, we'll get back to LSU's offense in a second, but this Clemson defense definitely had some holes in it, and the biggest question mark coming into the season was, would they be able to stop the run? Because they weren't able to stop the run worth anything last year. So I think there's definitely room for improvement for this Clemson defense for sure. But definitely still trying to improve on that run game. 8 TFLs, that's a good sign. But only getting 1 sack on Nussmeier. Again, we'll get to the LSU offense in a second, but you got to be putting more pressure on the quarterback. You're only getting 1 sack. We got to be pressuring the quarterback better if you're Clemson's defense and Tom Allen for sure. Moving over to LSU, Nussmeier played a very solid game. This has got to be a glitch. This -1 QBR. There's no way he had a -1 QBR. 28 of 38, 232, and a touchdown. That's classic Garrett Nussmeier. I wasn't expecting him to throw for 400 plus in this game, but I definitely think he was serviceable in this game for sure. And he played his role. Caden Durham, again, 17 carries, 74 yards. This LSU offense might, if they can run the ball as effectively as they did the other night, again, only 3.5 yards per carry, like average per carry. I think doesn't do it justice. Clemson couldn't really do anything, especially when Caden Durham was in the game. There were a few times he was able to bounce his runs outside. outside the tackles when they were called for inside runs, and he was able to bounce them, and Clemson just couldn't tackle him. I don't know what was going on with Clemson's defense and their inability to tackle the running back. But LSU, if they have some sort of running game to balance with the high powered passing attack of Nussmeier, and these receivers, Aaron Anderson, Juwan Johnson, Berrien Brown, Xavier Thomas, if they're able to balance this high powered passing attack with a at least average run game, if they at least have an average run game early on here in the season, they're definitely a true contender, not only in the SEC but nationally, because that's the biggest talking point about LSU coming into the season was, were they going to be able to have a more balanced run game to go along with the stacked receiver group that they have. Aaron Anderson had a game, 6 catches for 99 yards. Juwan Johnson had a few. Berrien Brown. I kind of expected more out of Berrien Brown. I'm not going to lie, only because he was the most touted, transfer receiver coming into LSU, coming over from Kentucky. True track speed. So if you get him in a one-on-one on the outside, you would almost 9 out of 10 times expect him to burn the DB. So kind of expected more out of Berrien Brown in the spot, but only one game, and I'm sure he was a very notable player that Clemson's defense was keeping an eye out on, therefore opening it up more for Aaron Anderson to have his 6 catches for 99 yards. And Trey'Dez Green, huge touchdown, mossing, who I don't know who was covering him, but a huge touchdown there in the third quarter to put LSU up, and that was history from there. LSU, a huge win to finish their season. Not finish their season. Jeez, what am I talking about? Start their season, excuse me. So LSU, again, going into Clemson, huge win, 17-10 over the Clemson Tigers. Again, Clemson really needs to work on, they need to find a running back, in my opinion. Randall is not the option at running back. So whatever you got to do, if you have to bring in, let me pull up their box score. Who else got carries for Clemson? Because there's got to be better options. So Tyler Brown, he only got 1 carry. But he's a receiver. Okay, so we can't hand off inside zone to a receiver. That's the moral of the story that I'm trying to present here. We're not handing the ball off to any more receivers. If I'm Clemson, I'm not handing the ball off to Adam Randall much longer until he proves it in practice. Because as a Moomy, yeah, we're playing this kid. We're playing this kid. If I'm Dabo Swinney, I'm playing this kid because we need a run game. We need a run game. I don't care if it's LSU, Georgia Tech, or we end up playing Miami in the ACC championship game. We need a run game, because if we want to get to the expectations that Dabo Swinney has for this team, they need a run game. So Adam Randall, I think that experiment's done. Personally, I just don't see it. I just don't think it's a good fit. Converted receiver again, as we talked about, but I just don't think Adam Randall is really the answer here at running back for Clemson. So yeah, LSU, huge win. I did end up picking Clemson before this game, so but I haven't gotten any flack from LSU fans, so we're good on that. Again, another pick'em game. Most of those big time games were pick'ems at the end of the day. So, but we'll take it. LSU, huge win on the road to start their season. Their first season opening win in 5 years. It was 5 years, yeah. Unbelievable performance from LSU to go into Death Valley in South Carolina and get a huge win there. So we're going to move on to Sunday, the 2 games. We're not going to spend a lot of time on South Carolina, Virginia Tech, because South Carolina took control of that game out in the end. Lenore Sellers did look really good in that game. If Nick Harbor, stays consistent out there at receiver, I think South Carolina is a real contender there in the SEC. But we're going to go to the last headliner game of the week that did happen on Sunday night. Notre Dame heading down to South Beach to take on the Miami Hurricanes. CJ Carr looked very solid for Notre Dame. I know that's not going to be the main talking point of this game, but I don't think I know that pick was kind of what that interception was not on him. I think CJ Carr is the answer for Notre Dame at quarterback. I don't think they should be moving or even considering going to Kenny Minchie against Texas A&M. I do think CJ Carr was very good, not very good. He was pretty good against Miami. And I think he's the right option at quarterback for Notre Dame coming into this season. Now, this is the glaring issue. If you're watching live here, we are going to post a recording, an audio recording on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Shout out. Jadarian Price getting 6 carries for 45 yards, and then Jeremiah Love, their starting tailback, getting 10 carries for 33 yards. Even CJ Carr carrying it 11 times for 16 yards. Like, Notre Dame, what are we doing? I fully understand Miami's defensive front was the key to their defense and the strongest point of their defense. I totally understand that their defensive line was no joke, but Jeremiah Love, 10 carries for 33 yards. What are we doing? Notre Dame O-line. Like, this cannot be happening. This cannot be happening for Notre Dame. If you expect to have the offensive caliber that you did last season, you gotta be doing better with these two. And I'm looking directly at the O-line. The O-line has got to be doing better for these two, because you have two, all-star running backs. One is arguably the best running back in the country. In my eyes, he's the best running back in the country. And then you have Jadarian Price, who's another top 10 running back right behind him. Like, Notre Dame has got to be more dominant up front. I don't care if it's Miami. You got to at least have some serviceable, production out of Price and Love. And even if you want to keep mixing in CJ Carr in the run game, even though this is a really, really bad stat line, 11 carries, 16 yards, 1.5 average. That's not a good stat line at all for CJ Carr running the ball. Now, he was able to pass it around a little bit. Eli Raridan, 5 catches, 97 yards, had a good day. Malachi Fields, the transfer, 3 carries, 48 yards. Faison coming back, 5 carries for 5 receptions for 33 yards and the touchdown. So they've got some receivers there, and I talked about that in the preview for this game too. Notre Dame, I think the most underrated part of their whole entire team is their receiver group. I really think they have a really underrated receiver group. And time will still tell. Time will still tell. Excuse me. If that will be true. But again, I don't think CJ Carr was really the problem for Notre Dame in this game. The glaring issue was on the offensive line. Even in pass protection, there were a few times that I was like, what are they doing? I even saw a clip today. Shout out Landon Tangwell. He was talking over a clip about how the right tackle just completely opened his hips and just I think it was Ruben Bain, just basically open the gate and let him walk through. Like, it was insane, that Notre Dame offensive line. And I kind of expected more out of them, only because everyone kept talking about how they kept backfilling that offensive line group. And they were definitely the glaring issue on that Notre Dame offense for sure. Now, going over to Miami, Carson Beck, again, hand up. I've said time and time again in the preseason leading up to this game specifically that Carson Beck, I do not trust him. I don't see what everyone else sees in him. I understand he won a national championship at Georgia. I just didn't fully believe in the hype, especially with this Miami receiving group having to replace their top 6 receivers from last season. I wasn't believing in the hype. I wasn't falling into the trap, and it ended up not being a trap. Carson Beck might be legit. I completely glossed over this. Again, hand up. Carson Beck, you've proven me wrong. And that's why we're here. That's why we are recapping these games. That's why we are going back on our predictions. And we are putting our hand up where we were wrong. Carson Beck, 20 of 31, 205 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 85 QBR. Great performance from him. Can't complain with that. Mark Fletcher and Charmar Brown, definitely were serviceable at running back for sure. Don't really like a 3.4 average on 37 carries. But these two were really the bell cows of that offense, and they were serviceable at best. So definitely solid against a stout Notre Dame front for sure. But the biggest talking points for Miami's offense outside of Carson Beck, Malachi Toney, the true freshman, and CJ Daniels, the transfer, they both had days. Malachi Toney with a touchdown there in the first score of the game, and then CJ Daniels, unbelievable one-handed catch for another touchdown. That arguably, if he missed catching that ball, it either would have been dropped or most likely would have been an interception, because there was a Notre Dame defensive back right behind that ball. If CJ Daniels did not just put his right paw up there and snag that ball out of the air. So unbelievable play by him. But these two look to be the leaders of this offense, Malachi Toney and CJ Daniels, at least out at receiver. Was really impressed by them, especially because that was my biggest question mark with Miami coming into the season, is how is this receiver group really going to stack up after losing their top 6 weapons last year. So hats off to Miami. A great performance, but again, Notre Dame, I would not be too stressed about what we got out of them. CJ Carr, I think, is the right person to be starting a quarterback for Notre Dame. I don't think he was the issue in this game. Again, they need more production out of Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. That O-line has to improve, especially after this week. They have a bye week this week, and then they have A&M coming into South Bend to take on the Fighting Irish. So they definitely need more production out of that running back group for sure. But mainly we're pointing the finger at the O-line. If we have to point a finger at anyone, we're pointing it at the O-line. They need to improve, especially at least they have a week to do it before a good SEC defense in Texas A&M comes in there. So Miami, good performance, answered a lot of questions. I think that receiver group will be able to live up to the expectations that a lot of people had for them. If you're going to play receiver at Miami, you have a lot of shoes to fill, especially losing your top 6 pass catchers from last season. So Miami ends up winning the game 27-24. We ended up taking Notre Dame in this spot only because I thought their O-line was going to play a lot better than they did, and they clearly didn't. So again, every game we've talked about here, I am 0 for 4 in the games we've talked about. And didn't really have a great weekend with picks at all. So hand up, we got to be better. We got to get back to the drawing board for sure. And that's what I plan to do. That's what I plan to do. We're going to get back to the drawing board going forward here into week 2. So real quick, before we get into, actually, no, we're just going to do it. So coming up now, we've got my week 2 top 25. I'm going to try to explain this as best I can. I kind of, based on performances from last week and the seasons that I still think that these teams can have going forward, I'm going to release my week 2 top 25 right now. That is not the view I wanted. There we go. Okay. My week 2 top 25 is as follows. On the outside, in no particular order, we have Auburn off of a great win against Baylor, who is also on the outside, the Baylor Bears. I did have them ranked 22nd, and I do have them dropping out of my top 25. SMU, I still have on the outside, but that could change this week. If they beat Baylor, I could see them potentially jumping up into my top 25. Duke has a huge one coming up this week against Illinois. The Fighting Illini heading down to Duke, heading down to Durham to take on the Blue Devils. That's going to be a huge game at noon Eastern coming up on Saturday. If Duke wins that game, I could easily see them jumping up in the top 25 as well. Louisville, sneaky trap game, in my opinion, on Friday, hosting the JMU Dukes there in Louisville, Kentucky. I think the Cardinals can still pull it off, but definitely a trap game for sure against JMU. USC 73-13, I believe it was, against Missouri State in their first game at the FBS ranks. USC just handed it to them. So definitely caught my eye I definitely think USC is one to watch out there in the Big Ten. Tulane gets a win over Northwestern. In week 1, a bunch of controversy there about the uniform situation that was going on there against Northwestern, but we're not going to talk about that on this show. Shout out John Summerall, though. Love the job he's doing with Tulane. They're my pick in the group of 5, and they are very much still in contention. Nebraska, I did have them ranked going into the season, but I think they were a little underwhelming, their performance against Cincinnati. I kind of expected Nebraska to win that game by 10 plus points, and shout out to Sorsby and Cincinnati, kept it close. Almost made a comeback there if it wasn't for a great interception at the end of the game for Nebraska. So I think that team has a lot of work still to do, but I have them dropping out of my top 25 for now. TCU gets a huge win last night against Bill Belichick in his first game for UNC. TCU laid it on him. I almost put him at 25 instead of Florida State, but you had to put Florida State in the top 25 after you get a win of that level against Alabama. So the TCU definitely caught my eye for sure. Great performance by that squad, especially spoiling a game of that magnitude for Bill Belichick in his first game. South Florida obviously getting a huge win over Boise State. I did not have Boise State ranked in my top 25, so that's not an upset in my eyes, or at least according to my preseason poll. But South Florida got a huge test coming up this week against Florida, my 14th ranked team in this week's poll. Can Byron Brown really replicate the performance that he had against Boise State? We shall see. And Cal, I have Cal just on the outside looking into my top 25. Sagapola Tele, one to watch out there for the Golden Bears. They got a quarterback for sure. The lefty out of Hawaii, can sling it. Started the game 6 for 6. I did not stay up for this game, but I did watch the highlights, and he played really well in his first game as a true freshman for Cal. So Sagapola Tele, one to watch out there for Cal. And that wraps up the teams on the outside. Now, getting into the actual top 25 rankings, going from completely unranked in my eyes to number 25, the Florida State Seminoles. You have to put them in the top 25 after getting a win of that caliber. If they can carry momentum into these next few games, I definitely see them moving up for sure in my rankings. Also going from unranked or just on the outside in the preseason to number 24, we have the Iowa State Cyclones. 2 huge wins to start the year, coming back from Ireland, getting a huge win over Kansas State, similar to Kansas State, almost falling flat in their game coming back from Ireland. They get a huge win over South Dakota at home, leading into a huge game this week against Iowa at home in this for the Cy-Hawk Trophy coming up on Saturday. Oklahoma, I have 23. I also had them just on the outside looking in to start the season, and I think John Mateer had a great game on Saturday in week 1. Now, there were a couple inconsistencies from him, but he did set, I think it was the passing yards record for first game at Oklahoma was the record he broke there. And they have a huge game against Michigan coming up on Saturday, the 15th ranked team. But we'll get to Michigan in a second. But yeah, Oklahoma gets a huge win in week 1. I have them going from unranked to number 23 in my poll. Georgia Tech moving up a spot after a huge win against Colorado on the road. Great rebound from 3 turnovers in the first quarter to pull out a win there with a minute left. Haynes King, huge game on the ground, over 150 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns. So Georgia Tech, again, my ACC runner-up coming into this season. Ole Miss, I have them just dropping a spot, only because the team above them, Utah at number 20, played a heck of a game against UCLA out there in the Rose Bowl. Absolutely destroyed them. Wasn't even close. Nico Iamaleov is definitely going to have some growing pains out there for UCLA. Devin Dampier looked every bit of advertised for Utah with new offensive coordinator Jason Beck. So Utah bumping up to 20, came into the season as the number 25 team. Texas Tech just drops a spot. They still won their game. I still think highly of the Red Raiders, just the way things shook out with teams above them. I have them just dropping 1 spot to 19. Indiana was definitely underwhelming. They dropped 5 spots. I had them at 14. They will drop to 18. and I had them at 13, dropping to 18. Indiana, I just don't. They did not play to the level I expected them to against Old Dominion of all teams. They only won, I believe it was 27-10 or something in that realm. And they just didn't play. I expected them to win by arguably 30 points against ODU, and they kind of laid an egg in that spot, didn't cover the number that was put out there on sportsbooks. So Indiana, I have just dropping a spot. Tennessee with a great performance against Syracuse, I have them bumping up 2 spots to number 17. Joey Aguilar is the answer there for Josh Heupel in that offense for sure. Definitely got to keep an eye out on Joey Aguilar. Now, story of the weekend, Alabama. I have them dropping 11 spots. I had them as my number 5 team. I have them dropping all the way to 16. I'm not going to drop them out of the top 20 just yet. Keyword there on just yet, because they have a huge game early on in the season here against Georgia, which could easily, make or break their season early on here for Alabama. And of course, as my national title pick, I have to stick with it. I'm not going back on my laurels. We're sticking with Alabama as my national championship pick, but I need Kalen DeBoer to figure out that whole situation and going on there. We're not going to take too much time on that, but I need Kalen DeBoer to figure it out as soon as possible, preferably yesterday in the team meeting, summarizing that Florida State game. So Alabama, I've dropping all the way to 16. Michigan bumping up due to Alabama's drop. Florida bumping up. I have South Carolina, pretty big jump, 3 spots. They were my number 16 team. I have them at number 13. Illinois, again, huge game on the road at Duke this week, jumping up 2 spots to number 12. Got a huge win in week 1. Texas A&M bumping up a spot to number 11. Arizona State, I've staying at the same spot at number 10. Notre Dame, due to their loss, I have them dropping from 6 to 9. I have them dropping 3 spots. Clemson, my number 1 team, definitely didn't live up to my expectations in the first game against LSU. I at least thought they would be somewhat competitive and, it was competitive. Have some semblance of a run game with converted wide receiver Adam Randall, and it just didn't. I was not impressed at all with that Clemson run game. So they're going to drop all the way to number 8. Miami, huge win against Notre Dame. They were my number 10 team. I have them jumping to 7. Oregon jumps 3 spots to number 6. Texas was my number 3 team. I have them dropping back 2 spots to number 5. Again, played a really close game against Ohio State. Arch Manning's got to answer a bunch of questions. If he's really the guy there for Sarkisian, and I think he still is. I don't think we should really be selling stock on Arch going forward. I still think he's definitely a really high caliber quarterback and can be really good there for Sarkisian in Texas going forward. So only dropping to number 5. I don't think the performance that they put up really has them dropping any further than that. Georgia going up to number 4, got a huge win over Marshall in week 1. LSU, another huge jump, going to number 5, or going up 5 spots to number 3. They were my 8th team in the country coming into the season. Huge performance by that defense, and they showed they had a run game. So I'm gonna put them at number 3. If they have a comparable run game with a stout defensive line and a really stacked receiver room, I trust Garrett Nussmeier. And Brian Kelly, has answered a lot of questions coming into the season. And also flamed Dabo Swinney in his press conference today. So I've got LSU jumping up 5 spots to number 3. Penn State will stay the same at number 2. Took care of their business against Nevada. I watched that game in person. And they finally have receivers. I can tell you that. Kyron Hudson and Trevor Pena came as advertised. So I have Penn State staying the same as number 2. And my new number 1 team in the Love for the Game poll, week 2 edition, the Ohio State Buckeyes, jumping up from, that should have been a +2. They were my number 3 team. Ohio State jumping up 2 spots to the number 1 team in the country. You get a great win like that over Texas, shut them down in the way that you did with Matt Patricia. The questions still to be answered on offense, but I think those will quickly get answered in their next few games. Especially, I don't think Julian Sand is really going to fall off a cliff. I still think he is going to be the quarterback going forward for Ohio State. I still think he's got a lot of improvement still to come, and I think he definitely is going to be the quarterback of the future there for Ohio State for sure. So there you go. That will wrap out my top 25. Just to recap: number 25, Florida State; number 24, Iowa State; number 23, Oklahoma; number 22, Georgia Tech; number 21, Ole Miss; number 20, Utah; number 19, Texas Tech; number 18, Indiana; number 17, Tennessee. Biggest drop of the week, Alabama down to 16, Michigan 15, 14, Florida, 13, South Carolina, 12, Illinois, 11, Texas A&M, 10, Arizona State, 9, Notre Dame, Clemson number 8, Miami number 7, Oregon 6, and then my top 20, and then my top 5, Texas 5, Georgia 4, LSU 3, Penn State staying the same at 2, and Ohio State, my new number 1 team in the Love for the Game poll. And that is going to wrap it up for this live edition of Love for the Game. I appreciate everyone that tuned in to this live episode. I'm going to try to do more live editions of the show. I think it's just good in case folks want to come in, give their say on the current happenings in the college football world. So coming up tomorrow night, actually, I'm going to be live on Twitter Spaces with my guy Lowe and Krusty's. They do a show called No Huddle. It's just an hour, quickly previewing the games coming up for the coming week. So I'm going to be live on Twitter Spaces. If you guys want to hop on there, it's going to be at 9 p.m. Eastern tomorrow on Twitter Spaces. I'm going to be a guest speaker on that show with Lowe, Krusty's, and also Sosa. So if anyone wants to hop on over there, we're going to be talking the week 2 slate coming up this Saturday, and that is pretty much all the announcements. Also, shout out Outlier, new sponsor, right up there. Outlier, new sponsor. Shout out to them. Appreciate all their support and hopping on as a new partner for the Love for the Game podcast. So that is going to do it for this episode of Love for the Game. I really appreciate you all tuning in. And I will catch you tomorrow night and on Thursday for our week 2 preview show. Thank you for joining us. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe on the YouTube, and follow us over on Instagram, TikTok, and X at Lftg Pod 01. I really appreciate all the support. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great night, and God bless.